Are you having trouble being consistent with carnivore, or you feel like you need to up your carnivore game? Well, you probably struggle with this one thing. Hey, what's shaking bacon? I hope you're doing well. So carnivore can be complicated for some people because sometimes it can be too overwhelming trying to deal with sugar and carbohydrate addiction. And that's what keeps people from being consistent with carnivore. And they always want to try and be better. Maybe they're struggling with health problems. Maybe they're struggling with actually being just strict with carnivore. Maybe it's just their weight. Whatever it is, they're having difficulty and they need to try and up their game. Sometimes they're already being very strict. Like myself, I haven't cheated with a lick, taste, or bite in well over 2.5 years. But what's happening is I still have some health problems, and that's from not being consistent with carnivore when I was trying to be. I could have been 5 years ahead of where I am now, more than that. I was actually zero carb back in 2013. And if I would have been consistent with that longer than the year I was really strict with it, I probably wouldn't be dealing with any of these health problems now. I made the situation more complicated than it needed to be, but keep in mind, I was dealing with a sugar and carbohydrate addiction. So it's not like it was always just a choice that was easy to make. It was something where I thought, I can handle this. You know, I can incorporate some sugar back into my diet. I was still at 285 pounds, but at 6'2", that's not such a bad place to be. I still had more to go, but I thought I was able to manage my sugar and carbohydrate addiction. And one of the things that made it more difficult was keeping artificial sweeteners in your diet. When you keep artificial sweeteners in your diet, maybe it's something you're putting in your beverages, maybe it's just a gum or a candy that you're still having. What you're doing is you're negotiating. You're an addict. You're having trouble getting rid of that one thing. And you're making, whether you want to call it excuses or allowances, whichever you want to call it, you're making those so that you can keep that in your diet. And it's making your day-to-day struggles more difficult because you're probably not as consistent with carnivore as you want to be. Now, if you don't deal with sugar and carbohydrate addiction, this really isn't an issue for you. But I'm willing to bet you know people who do have this issue. Maybe it's a loved one, maybe it's a friend or family member, maybe it's a coworker. But I can guarantee you know people who are dealing with sugar and carbohydrate addiction. And some people come by it honestly. They're like, oh, I could never do that. I could never cut out pasta, or I could never cut out bread, or I could never cut out soda. I could never cut out alcohol. What those are different forms of sugar and carbohydrate addiction. And if you're dealing with that yourself, you need to get that under control because you're going to have a heck of a hard time. It's going to be a consistent battle trying to be strict carnivore when you're keeping that stuff in your day-to-day lifestyle. Maybe it's just once a day, maybe it's many times through the day, but you'll always have cravings. And when you always have cravings, you're never gonna have the peace of mind people experience when they're doing a carnivore way of eating. Unless you're having like chicken and turkey all the time, you're usually relatively high fat, between 60 to 80%. I think most people are closer to 80%. If you eat lower than say 60% or even 70% for some people, you might be dealing with rabbit starvation. So I made a video about that topic just a little while ago. You can check that out. But you're making this an uphill battle. You think, or you've convinced yourself that you're making it an easier uphill battle because you don't want to cut out too many things at once, but you're not. You're negotiating with your addiction. And what you want to do is go cold turkey. Yeah, it sucks. It's only going to suck for a week or two though. The odd person I've run into on social media, sometimes it's been like 3 weeks, but most people, the physical sensations go away within 7 to 10 days. The odd person, it might be 2 weeks. And you can combat that. You can combat that with salt. You can combat that with taking potassium chloride. So that's like one of those salt substitutes you can buy. I highly recommend. I've been doing it for the last little while and I feel good doing that. It doesn't taste quite as good as salt. I would mix it in with salt if you're ever going to try that with your food. But having that potassium in your body really helps manage cravings. Same with the salt. So make sure that you're substituting those cravings with something else, like staying full on meat. Because you're having difficulty with that craving, you're going to want to try and give in over time. And just because those physical cravings go away in a matter of 1 to 3 weeks, most people it's more like a week. What happens is the psychological component's still there, and that can take months to go away. And that's where you trick and fool yourself when you go to an event. There's going to be lots of barbecues coming up in the summer for people. You go to some of these events and then you have something that's off the diet. Maybe you're a little dehydrated from being out in the sun all day and you just think, you know what, suddenly that pie looks pretty good. And then you have something off the carnivore diet that you thought you were kind of protecting yourself against because you did everything you needed to when you went to that event. You ate before so you wouldn't be hungry. You brought some carnivore snacking food or meal so that you wouldn't cheat. But what happens is you're still dealing with a habit of sugar and carbohydrates. And that's where having that artificial sweetener in there might be making it more of an uphill battle than you need. I understand addiction. I've been through it myself, and so have lots of other carnivores. And most people have to go cold turkey when they're dealing with an addiction. You don't hear too many successful smokers that cut back gradually. It's possible. It's something that they can do, I'm sure. But typically the problem with most addiction, this is what I found with my addiction, it's like an alcoholic and a smoker. Like a smoker, I would give in to all my cravings. They get really frustrated and they get tense until they get that cigarette, and then they calm down and they're good for another while. Some people it's a half hour, some people it's another 2 hours, maybe a little longer for some people, but they need to have their fix. And then when it comes to the alcohol comparison, alcoholics, they always say, one drink is too much and 30 isn't enough. Because once you have that one drink, you starve yourself because you're like, no, I can't do that. I can't do it. But once you have that one drink, you've lost control. And I've been there. I know what it's like. And then you have a lot. So there's at least two different ways that these addictions are being managed. Abstinence can only get you so far if you're not consistent. Trying to control your frequency and portion size doesn't always work with people. Now, if you can make that happen and survive getting on carnivore without those horrible cravings all the time, cutting back from, say, I don't know, something ridiculous like a pack of gum a day down to half a pack in a week, then that's an accomplishment. But you have to keep moving from there. So even though my recommendation is give it all up cold turkey and just deal with the week of feeling like crap, some people might have to do it this way. Go 1 week, cut down to 50%, the next week cut down 50% from that, and then the next week cut it out. But like, don't let this drag out for months. Don't let it drag out for like 6 months or even 1 full month. You want to try and deal with that, even though it's in a gradual state, you want to try and do it in a faster window of time. We're talking about an addiction here. And the fact that you're having trouble giving something up kind of shows that you have an addiction. You can't work with addictions until you have them under control. That's a different place to be in. But when you're trying to deal with the addiction, often the recipe is cold turkey. When you're not doing cold turkey, you're just negotiating with your addiction. Try not to do that. Remember your motivation as to why you went carnivore to begin with, to get your health under control. And there's a difference between getting most of the way there with carnivore and getting all the way there. When people do 95% carnivore, that's often enough for them to manage their health problems if they're already a relatively healthy person. Some people who have a long history of health problems, they often have to go all the way 100%, especially if they're dealing with a carbohydrate or sugar addiction. You have to make carnivore stable grounding for you so that you can do those things. And if you're doing too much at once, it's complicating it. Now, I'm of course not a professional addiction counselor, but I've been there myself, and I tried negotiating for years, and it even led me to a heart attack. And even after my heart attack of negotiating with zero carb and carnivore, I still wasn't giving up my carbohydrates and my sugar. If that doesn't show how far an addiction can take somebody, I don't know what does. I eventually got to that point where I had it under control. It took a lot of damage to my body to get there. And once you're on the other side, you don't look back. It's really rare you hear about these carnivores sliding off the wagon when they've been really strict for a long time. But when you do, they fool themselves and they think, you know what? It's been 3 years, it's been 2 years, it's been 5 years. I'm just going to have that one bite. You're an addict. You don't hear about people who smoke, who quit for 5 years and then have a cigarette and don't go back. Usually they do. And you're one of those people. Just replace the word sugar substitute with nicotine or heroin or alcohol. And I'm telling you, everything gets a little more simple when you look at it like that. Because an addiction is an addiction. Doesn't matter what you're addicted to. They're all treated virtually the same way when it comes to addiction counseling. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. I didn't mean to get on a soapbox with it, but I know sometimes when dealing with addiction, you have to be a little more strict. So thanks a lot. Take care. Talk to you later.